Over the last couple of weeks, I've had a bit of a wake-up call. Some of you may know that from time to time, I can suffer with gout flare-ups. In my family, on my father's side, there's always been issues connected to inflammation, really. For some, it's arthritis, for others, kidney stones, and for me, it seems to have been gout. Normally, I manage it pretty well. One of the biggest things for me has always been hydration, especially living here in Hungary, where summer temperatures can become extremely hot and dry. But last week, for reasons I still can't fully explain myself, I simply didn't drink enough water for several days. And unfortunately, my body reminded me who was actually in charge. The strange thing this time was that it didn't begin in the foot like people normally associate with gout. It started in my knee. So at first I genuinely thought I'd just strained it somehow while working outside. And because I thought it was only a strain, I carried on trying to work, trying to stand, trying to move around the garden. But eventually it got to the point where I realized something really wasn't right. Normally, walking up to the tap to turn the water on would take me maybe 30 seconds. Right now, it's taking me closer to 5 minutes. And when something suddenly limits your mobility like that, even temporarily, it gives you a lot of time to think. Because while all this has been happening, the garden hasn't stopped. The season keeps moving forward, whether we're ready or not. And actually, a lot of these thoughts had already been quietly sitting in the back of my mind before the gout flare-up started, partly from watching how some of the Korean growers work, partly from looking at simpler ways of gardening, and partly from asking myself a fairly honest question: will I still want to garden like this in 5 or 10 years' time? Not whether I'll still want to grow food, I absolutely will, but whether I'll want to do it in the same physically demanding way. Because I think one thing that slowly happens as we get older is that we start looking at our gardens differently. Not negatively, just realistically. You start thinking more about sustainability, not just environmentally, but physically as well. And interestingly, this week really reinforced those thoughts for me. Because while I've been hobbling around like an old pirate with a walking stick, the greenhouse has been absolutely packed with plants desperate to get outside. Tomatoes, peppers, melons, cucumbers, chillies, everything waiting for the right moment. And honestly, there was definitely a point where I started worrying I could lose plants simply because I couldn't physically move around properly to deal with everything, especially after nurturing them from seed for weeks and months. Now, this is where the app genuinely helped me this year, not because it magically grows anything for you, but because the cold temperature alert stopped me planting too early. And that's an important distinction. This wasn't frost. This was those cold nights where technically there's no frost, but conditions still really aren't suitable for tender plants. Last year, I didn't have those warnings available, and honestly, I lost pretty much everything. This year, even though the greenhouse became overcrowded and stressful, I held back. And I'm glad I did, because eventually we reached the point where things could finally start moving outside properly. Now, admittedly, we became very important there. Because while I've been slowed down, the lady of the house has had to step in and help quite a bit. Although I should point out that when it comes to the strawberries, she already has a very important role. She weeds them, and in exchange she gets to pick them. Though I suspect for every strawberry that makes it into the bowl, another one mysteriously disappears somewhere else first. Funny how that happens. But despite everything, we've now managed to get the tomatoes planted outside. Some are growing directly in the beds. Others I've planted into pots near the greenhouse. And actually, I've modified the watering system this year as well. The pots now sit inside larger plastic trays. So when I water or feed them, the moisture stays available underneath rather than simply draining away into the soil. So the tomatoes can effectively draw up moisture from below when they need it. Again, another example really of trying to garden a little smarter and make things physically easier long term. We've also planted the cucumbers out into the main cage area. The chillies are out, the peppers are planted, everything has been heavily mulched with straw as well to help retain moisture and reduce watering pressure during the hotter months ahead. And not everything has gone perfectly either. The melon germination this year was honestly pretty poor. Out of 9 seeds of each variety, I think 3 was the best result I got. So roughly about a 30% success rate, but that's gardening sometimes. Not every tray becomes a success story. And I actually think it's important to say that openly, because social media can sometimes create the illusion that everybody else grows everything perfectly all the time. They don't. And despite the setbacks, there are still moments where the garden reminds you why you do all this in the first place. The garlic is looking fantastic at the moment after weeding the beds recently. The strawberries are nearly ready. And whenever something finally reaches the point of harvest, whether it's strawberries or anything else, there's always that sense of achievement, because food doesn't just magically appear. There's time behind it, patience behind it, mistakes behind it, weather behind it, and increasingly perhaps adaptation behind it too. I think that's one of the biggest things this recent flare-up has reminded me of, that gardening isn't really about forcing ourselves to work harder and harder every year. It's about learning how to keep growing sustainably as life changes around us. Sometimes that means simplifying systems, sometimes it means mulching more, sometimes it means asking for help, sometimes it means listening to your body before it forces you to listen. And perhaps that's the real message here. Not specifically gout, not specifically aging, but simply recognizing that life occasionally throws little reminders at all of us. For some people, it might be arthritis. For others, it might be an injury, exhaustion, illness, or something completely different. But eventually, most of us reach a point where we start asking, how do I continue doing the things I love in a way that still works for me physically and mentally long term? And honestly, I think gardening can actually help answer that question. Because despite everything, the garden keeps moving forward. The seasons continue, the strawberries ripen, the tomatoes go out, and somehow, even during difficult weeks, life continues growing around us. Anyway, I'd love to know if any of you have had moments where your body has forced you to rethink the way you garden, and also how you've adapted over the years, because I suspect a lot more people quietly think about these things than we probably realize. And if you'd like to explore the app, there's a link below. The weather alerts and sowing calendar are completely free to use, and there's also a 14-day free trial if you'd like to explore the rest of the features as well. But more than anything else, look after yourselves, drink enough water, keep moving when you can, and try to build a garden that works with your life rather than against it.